Coming from Erskineville, the entrepreneur in me figures that he could do something with that.
Great, thank you very much.
I think I'll be keeping them just for a while and then I'll work out a good purpose for them, but I'm happy to take suggestions.
You can start tweeting them.
It's good, start tweeting them, not in my handwriting.
Hi, Julia. My name is Jamie. My question for you is, what's the best piece of advice that you've received?
The best piece of advice... Look, I think the best grounding I got really was in my family home. My mother and father were, by instinct, believers in equal opportunity. My, two girls, my sister and I. I've sometimes reflected to myself, maybe if there'd been a son in the family, would it have been any different? Us, aim high, do your best, look after others. But my father was also an incredibly calm person. As a psychiatric nurse, I think you had to be calm, and I think I picked some of that up from him. I think apart from that grounding, possibly some of the best advice I've had is, along the way, don't, if you're going to like the one I've led will ultimately kill you. Don't worry about those things. Just keep your eyes on the main things.
Thank you.
Hello, Julia. My name is Benjamin and I'm based here in Sydney. I have two questions, but they're both very quick. The first one is, Bill Shorten or Anthony Albanese? And my second question is, of the sitting MPs currently there in Parliament, who do you think would make a good next female leader of the ALP?
Dorothy Dixon.
I think I may have given you an indication of who I think is a very talented female member of Parliament. Of the current Bill Albo contest, I'm actually not publicly stating a preference. I think it's more respectful for me to stay out of it and let them, and obviously I'll get a vote as a party member, but let them and the tens of thousands of party members work it out.
Great. Okay, so we'll go up behind us.
Jane Goodall from Toowoomba in Queensland. You were up against a leader of the opposition who repeatedly introduced censure motions calling you an embarrassment, dishonest, deceitful, incompetent, and the leader of government that was a complete shambles. Now that this person is starting his own term as Prime Minister, I'm afraid I have another advice question. What would you like to advise him?
And they were some of the nicer things he said about me.
Well, I guess that's one of the questions that some people have asked me to ask you, Julia, and that is, what is it that he used to call across the dispatch box to you that only you could hear?
Oh, I'd actually have to say across the dispatch box, it wasn't current Prime Minister Abbott who was occasionally he'd get involved, but more the people behind him. So Christopher Pyne in particular, I point to. For advice for Prime Minister Abbott, it's a big step from criticising what you think is wrong to working out and implementing what you think is right. On current indications, Prime Minister Abbott is intending to take that step slowly. For all of us, I think that might well be a good thing.
And we'll go back down the front.
Hi, Julia. My name's Vicky. I'm from the Warringah electorate, and I would love your advice. I've been involved in advocacy on behalf of the global poor for some years now. So naturally, 2 days out from the federal election, when there was a media blackout and the government announced that they were going to slash the foreign aid budget by $4.5 billion over 4 years, we were left gutted. So my questions for you are twofold. One, were you shocked, as we were in the aid and development sector, that they actually slashed it by that much? And secondly, if you were a grassroots advocate like myself that wakes up every morning in Warringah and the political landscape of the global poor seems so bleak, what would you do if you were in my shoes?
Well, I drink a few cups of coffee on waking up. I think that would be essential to getting the energy for the day in those circumstances. Look, to be frank, I wasn't at all shocked. When we were there, me and Wayne, we would spend time wargaming what they were likely to do to try and make their budget stuff add up because it had been so chaotic. And the obvious thing we thought they would do would be to cut foreign aid. I mean, Wayne would have put $1 million on it, I think, and won the bet. So I wasn't at all surprised. What I think we need to do, people who care passionately about this issue, and you obviously do, is keep raising your voice about it. But I actually think it's not just a question of the quantum. I actually fear that there are early indications that we're going down the Canadian sort of route where you can't put aid money unless you can show a direct economic advantage or political advantage to Australia, which means some of the, investments which most make a difference to the world's poor would be neglected. So I actually think the front of the fight is going to be there, and then the fight about quantum still has to be had. So even in your electorate, I'd be looking for like-minded people to galvanise around that.
Thank you. Great.
Ms Gillard, while quite rightly there's been a focus on your agenda tonight, can I just say that as a white heterosexual Christian male, you have plenty of fans and lots of deep respect and admiration amongst us as well. But I look at the broader right in society, and not just in Parliament, but we have the Andrew Bolts and the Piers Ackermans and the Alan Joneses. They seem to be very active and organised, where the progressive left outside of Parliament tends to sort of sit more there in silent rage. What do we need to do to help not just overcome, but to challenge that and to counter?
Well, one thing I've certainly done since leaving politics, and let me just describe the liberation of it, don't read them and don't listen. So I think turning them off, not reading them helps a great deal. There are very loud voices in our media, and it is necessary for people with a progressive worldview to find other ways of organising. One of the reasons I've donated my time tonight is I do want to see long-term viability for alternate progressive media channels, including Anne Summers' own media work. If we can find the way of, credentialed voices in the media that are getting information to people differently, I think that is the strategy through. I actually think, maybe I'm just a, starry-eyed optimist, but in some ways I actually think we're seeing the death throes of this kind of business model in the newspapers, and we are going to emerge into a media landscape where it will be about trusted voices to give you the facts, to tell you when they're giving you their opinion, and with, all of the reasons they have that opinion transparent so you can judge its worth. I think we're going to get there, but we've got a few more years of these death throes yet.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Grace from just, West Sydney. I was just wondering, through all that horrible sexism, is there anything that you said to yourself to keep yourself motivated?
Great question. That is a great question. I now need to answer it, not using words that are inappropriate. Given... How old are you?
11.
Sorry?
11.
11. Okay. Right. I'll just take that into account. I certainly, in moments of some, stress and pressure. For example, when I was getting myself together to go out and give my final speech as Prime Minister, I certainly did say to myself that I wouldn't give those people the satisfaction of seeing me shed a tear. I wouldn't do that. So if you can use some iteration of don't let them get you down, I think that would be useful.
Thank you.
And up the back.
Ms Gillard, as one of around approximately 4 million Australians who currently suffers from a mental illness, I know personally the importance of psychology sessions in overcoming these kind of illnesses. However, such sessions are extremely costly, at around $220 an hour, and thus my question for you is why did the Gillard government cut the rebatable sessions available from around 18 per calendar year to 10?
I would have to defer on some of that to Tanya and potentially Nicola, depending on which phase of the government it was. But my recollection is we did a lot of restructuring in mental health expenditure to try and move expenditure from areas where we thought, yes, services were being provided, but that if we could spread the money from those services to things that were also effective and we thought potentially more effective, that would be a better way of spending the dollars. So we restructured and we added, which is why we've got a track record, for example, of investing in things like Headspace, which are youth mental health services, and EPIC centres, which are intensive support built on Pat McGorry's model for young people with mental health issues.
Thank you.
Sarah from Canberra. My question to you, ex-Prime Minister, I should say, is what tips would you give to survive those ruthless media scrutiny that you faced during your Prime Ministership?
I think really you just got to keep a sense, and I've said this before, but I think it's very important that particularly young people who might be contemplating a life in public, and that's not necessarily being in politics, it could be being the next Ann Summers, it could be a whole range of things. I think it's very important to have a sense of who you are and who your friends and family and partner and supporters are, that real version of you, as opposed to the version that can be out there in the media and distorted. And if, in my position, if my assessment of my own self-worth had depended day after day on what was the headline in the Daily Telegraph or the headline in the Australian, I would have led a very miserable life. So you've got to have a sense of your own self-worth that is separate to that, and just realise that's going to ebb and that's going to flow. Mostly for me it ebbed, but putting that to one side, it's not the thing that should become the focus. And I think in many ways we forget what politics is about. I mean, being Prime Minister isn't about getting up in the morning and reading nice things in the newspapers about yourself. It's about getting things done, and I always took more joy from the getting things done.
Go back down the front, please.
Hi, I'm Julia